In the last two debates of the U.S. presidential campaign, the first presidential debate and then also the first and only vice presidential debate, the issue of implicit bias was raised, and specifically raised both times in the context of police reform and criminal justice reform. And I was very impressed that that topic even made it into the discussion, because that is something that a lot of us on the internet have discussed or been interested in and read about over the years, specifically talking about how implicit bias plays a very large and very difficult to deal with role in the formation of prejudices and the formation of bigoted opinions and bigoted or prejudicial or discriminatory behavior. It's really difficult to pin down and to correct for implicit bias. And one of the main challenges there is that a lot of us just don't recognize it, or we refuse to accept that it exists, or that we ourselves are a party to it. And I was not all that surprised, but disappointed as ever when the subject came up in the VP debate, and Mike Pence, who is, of course, the Republican nominee for vice president, the running mate of Donald Trump, seemed to bristle at the very suggestion that we even discuss the topic. He seemed to think as that the suggestion that maybe unconscious bias plays a role in these police shootings that are occurring still at an outrageously rapid, frequent rate in the United States. The suggestion that implicit bias would play some sort of a role there was insulting to police officers, or was just a completely out of line slam on hardworking, honest cops, and it shows that we don't appreciate them and that we're too hard on them and that we're too quick to blame them. This right-wing fantasy world where cops don't get enough credit. And you saw that in Mike Pence's answer, where he seemed to get a little indignant at the suggestion that police might be susceptible to implicit bias. And that attitude is a perfect recipe for making sure that no change is actually accomplished, for making sure that we do not address this issue. It reminds me very much of when people on the internet say, well, the way to fix racism is just to stop talking about it. It's a way of shutting down a conversation that they don't want people to have, and to try and short circuit reforms that either they don't think are necessary or that they actively do not want, because they feel threatened by what would happen if those reforms were able to actually come into fruition. They had a moment of agreement during the VP debate, Tim Kaine and Mike Pence, on the implicit bias issue, where Tim Kaine brought up criminal justice reform. And Mike Pence said, well, I'm completely in favor of criminal justice reform. And then he touted several measures that he had overseen in the state of Indiana as governor, where he said, I'm all for criminal justice reform. And I really wish that Tim Kaine had followed up on that, or had been given an opportunity to follow up on that, because they didn't spend a whole lot of time in the debate talking about this issue. But you can't talk about criminal justice reform in any meaningful way without bringing the way police are treated by the criminal justice system into it. One of the problems with the police brutality issue in the United States is that not only do cops commit these awful crimes where they shoot and kill unarmed people in many cases, or at least people who did not seem to be posing a legitimate threat to justify the cop using deadly force on them, not only do those acts occur frequently, but the cop who commits the act almost never faces any significant discipline. They very rarely go to trial. Charges are often not even filed. There's clear evidence that prosecutors treat cops who are accused of these crimes very differently than they treat non-cops who are accused of equivalent crimes, that grand juries treat cops differently, that cops are afforded a much more robust presumption of innocence when their crimes are being investigated or their charges are being judged by a jury or by a judge. There's all this evidence from the criminal justice system that police who are accused of unlawful abuses, of excessive force, of unjustified killings, are treated with a lot more charity and a lot more compassion and understanding than people who are not police officers who are accused of similar crimes. That is a problem of the criminal justice system as much as it is a problem of police culture. And I think you can chalk a lot of that up to implicit bias. I don't think that in most cases there are conspiracies afoot for prosecutors or grand juries and police departments where they're conspiring to make sure that these bad cops or these cops who make huge, terrible mistakes are allowed to go free for some nefarious purpose. I think a lot of it is an unconscious favoritism toward the police, where cops are afforded the most charitable view of their actions and their motives possible, and every excuse is made and every possibility is explored to allow the cop to escape from the situation unscathed and without serious punishment. Of course, the other half of the problem is within the law enforcement community itself. A lot of us, I've never been a cop myself. I know people who are or have been. I have family members who are or have been police officers. There is, or at least there certainly seems to be, a culture in most police departments that operates to protect all cops, no matter what, even cops who act wrongly. And if you, as a police officer, blow the whistle or report one of your fellow officers for breaking the rules or for doing something he or she shouldn't have done, you, as the whistleblower, as the one who is reporting them, are the one who is punished. You're the one who is shunned by the rest of the cops. You're the one who is treated as a villain, not the person who committed a crime or committed an abusive thing. And that culture has to change. That culture has to be addressed and has to change. And I feel like a lot of that attitude of, well, we just need to give the cops the benefit of the doubt no matter what, is reflected in the attitude of people like Mike Pence, who just absolutely are indignant at the suggestion that cops might suffer from some implicit bias, that they might treat black folks differently than they treat white folks, without even realizing it, without necessarily meaning to do it, just because they perceive black folks to be more threatening or to be more untrustworthy than they perceive white folks to be. And if we don't acknowledge this, if we aren't even allowed to bring it up as a possibility, how are we ever going to fix it? I would argue that because one is a police officer, and because that job is not only very dangerous, but also essential to a free and peaceful society, that necessitates that they be given less of a benefit of the doubt than other people, because they have been invested with such authority. They are depended upon so much to enforce the laws, to keep the peace, to make sure that justice can be served in instances where crimes are committed, where people's rights are violated. Because we have entrusted police officers with this vital role in our society, and we give them relatively broad leeway to operate as they see fit and to use their own judgment on a case-by-case basis, we cannot hold them to a lower standard than other people. We must hold them to a higher standard. We must make sure that police officers and their conduct and the way they are handled in the criminal justice system when they find themselves in that system as a result of some transgression is utterly beyond reproach and beyond suspicion. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why any cop who cares about their job and cares about doing justice and cares about serving the people of their community and cares about doing the right thing and wielding that authority responsibly and living up to the trust that has been placed in them by their community, I cannot imagine why any cop in that situation with that frame of mind would be against criminal justice reform and against reforming the culture of the police department to root out and eliminate and punish and discourage the bad apples, as they are often called. The people who go too far, rather than circling the wagon and protecting the cops that fuck up and go too far or are just rotten. We need to turn that around. So instead of circling around them, they turn and they expel them. And they show them the light of day and they say, we will not tolerate this. This is not what we are about. This is not something that reflects our values. This is a violation of everything we should stand for. And yet the loudest, most indignant voices against police reform and criminal justice reform are often the cops themselves. And my only plea to them is, if you truly want to regain a lot of the lost respect that has been taken away from you, especially in the eyes of many in the African American community here in the United States, if you really want to rebuild that trust, or perhaps build it for the first time, because in many cases I don't think it was ever there, you need to show us that you are on our side, and that you take your commitment to justice and to fairness and to restraint and enforcing the law and protecting the community just as seriously as you expect us to take it when we look at you and when we judge you for your actions. Because that's not the message that I hear predominantly from cops who speak out on these issues. When I hear cops speaking out on these issues on talk shows, I just hear a lot of excuse making. I hear a lot of people saying this isn't that big of a deal, or we need to give cops the benefit of the doubt, or we're too hard on cops, or we need to give cops more respect for the tough job that they have. I don't hear a lot of cops coming out and being just horrified at the amount of abuse that is being done in this country at the hands of their fellow police officers. I don't see anger or disbelief or frustration at their fellow officers who fail to live up to the standard. I see apologetics, and I see excuse making for those officers who fail to live up to the standard, who have broken the trust placed in them by the public, by their community. And that has to come around and start moving in the other direction. If the police officers who demand respect from their communities, especially communities like the black community that have been disproportionately harmed by cops doing the wrong thing, if they ever want to rebuild that trust or gain that trust for the first time, that's what has to happen. It's not going to happen until cops and police departments and police unions stop doing things like endorsing fucking Donald Trump for president of the United States and start doing a lot more than they have been doing in most areas to rebuild or to establish that trust, and to let the people in those communities that they are charged with serving know that the cops are on the people's side. The cops are not on their own side. They're on the people's side, because that's the way it has to be. And a lot of people, quite rightly, unfortunately, don't think that that's the way it is. And as long as that is the situation, not only will it be incredibly difficult to move forward with police reform and criminal justice reform, but these awful abuses and killings will, unfortunately, I think, just continue to happen. And that is unacceptable. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.